Donald Trump's threatened the new scale of tariffs. Julia just gave us an idea of the 20% across the board. He put tariffs on 14% of total imports during the first 4 years in office. It was around $380 billion worth of goods. Now, tariffing everything that the US buys from abroad. And the World Trade Organization has a warning. It said lower income households could face the highest burdens. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is the Director General of the WTO. The Director General is with me now. I will say it before you have to say it. And it's this: the Americans will choose who they want, you will live with whatever the result is, and you will accommodate accordingly. I get that, Director General. But the reality is, I imagine you're quite terrified at the thought of 20% tariffs across the board.
Well, Richard, I think you said it well. We've, like other organizations, we've tried to do work that shows that protectionism, rising tariffs, are really, whichever way you look at it, detrimental to world output. Since 2018, the tariffs came on board in 2018, we've seen trade between China and the US grow 30% more slowly than their trade with the rest of the world. And we've also seen that rising protectionism is leading to like-minded countries trading more with each other than with countries that are not so like-minded. So we see that protectionism and tariffs have some negative impacts on world output and on world trade. But that being said, I think that here at the WTO, what we are focusing on is what do we need to be doing in order to make sure that we keep the 75% of world trade that is going on now under WTO terms. And I want to really stress that in spite of all the problems that we are facing now, which I'm not minimizing, we still have 75% of world trade going on WTO terms. That's a lot. How do we keep that steady? How do we keep that going? And that is what we are focusing on. And how do we reform ourselves at the WTO so that we can be fit to deal with 21st century issues? That's really what we're focused on, because like you said, we cannot control the way that votes go in the US.
But the real problem is, you heard Julia, who you know well, you heard Julia say, at the moment, trade is a dirty word. People feel they've lost out on trade. And the ability of you to reform the WTO, some would say it's taking too long.
No, Richard, I mean, give us a break. First, I'm not sure I agree with Julia about trade being a dirty word. How can something you depend on for 75% of your goods be a dirty word? But I understand where you're coming from. Look, let's be clear. There are two things that are happening with globalization. One is, for 75 years, it has delivered, lifted 1.5 billion people out of poverty. But we've forgotten that. We've taken it for granted. It's like the air you breathe. We don't no longer realize that walking into a store and buying the goods we want at whatever price, it's not to be taken for granted. We've done that. So we've forgotten. The second thing is that globalization did not benefit everybody. We should also be very clear about that. There are poor people in rich countries and poor regions that did not benefit. Either they lost jobs, not necessarily due to trade. It can sometimes be due to technology. And there were poor countries that didn't benefit. And so these things not being dealt with are leading to discontent. I think these are the two reasons we see a backlash against trade today. But can I say one more thing, Richard? Trade is also sometimes blamed for policies that do not emanate from trade. We have some macroeconomic policies where sometimes there's too much savings in one country and they're not consuming enough. Sometimes there's too much consumption in another and not enough savings. There are macroeconomic imbalances. And it's blamed on trade. We also need to deal with those. You need to deal with trade issues, but you need to deal with macroeconomic issues at the same time.
Okay. And the difficulty is 5 days to go. The election is going to mar us in whatever happens, probably for some days, if not weeks, afterwards. How worried are you that other countries will take the advantage of introducing their own protectionism if they feel it is now acceptable?
I am worried. I have to say that, Richard. I'm worried because we are seeing increasing signs of fragmentation of trade. And this is what we are counseling against, that tit for tat kinds of approaches do not really work. What we want WTO members to do, and they're doing, remember that WTO provides a forum where members can talk to each other to resolve disputes. We would like them to utilize more of those approaches than tit for tat, because the negative spillovers of tit for tat measures on the rest of the world, as well as on the countries carrying them out, can be quite important.
I'm grateful you joined us tonight. Thank you very much. You and I will talk many times, many more in the days, weeks and months ahead. It's good to see you. Thank you for staying up tonight and talking to us from Geneva. So.